Scary Stories 3 More Tales to Chill Your Bones. Collected Folklore retold by Alvin Schwartz. Illustrated by Stephen Gamel. The Wolf Girl. Travel northwest into the desert from Del Rio, Texas, and eventually you will come to Devil's River. In the 1830s, a trapper named John Dent and his wife Molly settled where Dry Creek runs into Devil's River. Dent was after beaver, which were plentiful there. He and Molly built a cabin from brush, and near it, they put up an arbor to give them shade. Molly Dent became pregnant. When she was ready to have their child, John Dent raced on horseback to their nearest neighbors, several miles away. "My wife is having a baby," he said to the man and his wife. "Can you help us?" They agreed to come at once. As they got ready to leave, a violent storm came up, and a bolt of lightning struck and killed John Dent. The man and his wife managed to find his cabin, but did not arrive until the next day. By then, Molly Dent was dead too. It looked as if she had given birth before she died, but the neighbors could not find the baby. Since there were wolf tracks all around, they decided the wolves had eaten it. They buried Molly Dent and left. A number of years after she died, people began to tell a strange tale. Some swore it was a true story. Others said it could have never happened. That story begins in a small settlement a dozen miles from Molly Dent's grave. Early one morning, a pack of wolves raced in from the desert and killed some goats. Such attacks were not unusual in those days. But a boy thought he saw a naked young girl with long blonde hair running with the wolves. A year or two later, a woman came up upon some wolves eating a goat they had just killed. Eating the goat with them, she claimed, was a naked young girl with long blonde hair. When the wolves and the girl saw her, they fled. The woman said that at first the girl ran on all fours. Then she stood and ran like a human, swiftly as the wolves. People started wondering if this wolf girl was Molly Dent's daughter. Had a mother wolf carried her off that day she was born and raised her as her own? If so, by now she would be 10 or 11 years old. As the story is told, some men began to look for the girl. They searched along the riverbanks and in the desert and its canyons. And one day, it is said, they found her, walking in a canyon with a wolf at her side. When the wolf ran, the girl hid in an opening in one of the canyon walls. When the men tried to capture her, she fought back, biting and scratching like an enraged animal. When they finally subdued her, she began screaming like a frightened young girl and howling like a frightened young wolf. Her captors bound her with rope, put her across a horse, and took her to a small ranch house in the desert. They would turn her over to the sheriff the next day. They placed her in an empty room and untied her. Terror-stricken, she hid in the shadows. They left her and locked the door. Soon, she was screaming and howling again. The men thought they would go mad listening to her, but at last, she stopped. Once night fell, wolves began howling in the distance. People say that each time they stopped, the girl howled in reply. As the story goes, the cries of wolves came from every direction and got closer and closer. Suddenly, as if a signal had been given, wolves attacked the horses and other livestock. The men rushed into the darkness, firing their guns. High up in the wall, in the room where they had left the girl, was a small window. A plank was nailed across it. She pulled the plank off, crawled through the window, and disappeared. Years passed with no word of the girl. Then one day, some men on horseback came around a bend in the Rio Grande, not far from Devil's River. They claimed they saw a young woman with long blonde hair feeding 2 wolf pups. When she saw the men, she snatched up the pups and ran into the brush. They rode after her, but she quickly left them behind. They searched and searched, but found no trace of her. That is the last we know of the wolf girl. And it is there, in the desert, near the Rio Grande, that this story ends. The dream. Lucy Morgan was an artist. She had spent a week painting in a small country town, and decided that the next day, she would move on. She would go to a village called Kingston. But that night, Lucy Morgan had a strange dream. She dreamed that she was walking up a dark, carved staircase and entered a bedroom. It was an ordinary room, except for two things. The carpet was made up of large squares that looked like trapdoors, and each of the windows was fastened shut with big nails that stuck up out of the wood. In her dream, Lucy Morgan went to sleep in that bedroom. During the night, a woman with a pale face and black eyes and long black hair came into the room. She leaned over the bed and whispered, "This is an evil place. Flee while you can." When the woman touched her arm to hurry her along, Lucy Morgan awakened from her dream with a shriek. She lay awake the rest of the night, trembling. In the morning, she told her landlady that she had decided not to go to Kingston after all. "I can't tell you why," she said, "but I just can't bring myself to go there." "Then why don't you go to Dorset?" the landlady said. "It's a pretty town and it isn't too far." So Lucy Morgan went to Dorset. Someone told her she could find a room in a house at the top of the hill. It was a pleasant-looking house, and the landlady there, a plump, motherly woman, was as nice as could be. "Let's look at the room," she said. "I think you will like it." They walked up a dark, carved staircase, like the one in Lucy's dream. In these old houses, the staircases are all the same, Lucy thought. But when the landlady opened the door to the bedroom, it was the exact same room from her dream, with the same carpet that looked like trapdoors, and the same windows fastened with big nails. "This is just a coincidence," Lucy told herself. "How do you like it?" the landlady asked. I'm not sure," she said. "Well, take your time," the landlady said. "I'll bring up some tea while you think about it." Lucy sat on the bed, staring at the trapdoors and the big nails. Soon, there was a knock at the door. "It's the landlady with tea," she thought. But it wasn't the landlady. It was the woman with the pale face and the black eyes and the long black hair. Lucy Morgan grabbed her things and fled. Sam's new pet. Sam stayed with his grandmother when his parents went to Mexico for their vacation. "We are going to bring you back something nice," his mother told him. "It will be a surprise." Before they came home, Sam's parents looked for something Sam would like. All they could find was a beautiful sombrero, but it cost too much. Later that afternoon, while they were eating their lunch in a park, they decided to buy the sombrero after all. Sam's father threw what was left of their sandwiches to some stray dogs, and they walked back to the marketplace. One of the animals followed them. It was a small, gray creature with short hair, short legs, and a long tail. Wherever they went, it followed. "Isn't he cute?" Sam's mother said. "He must be one of those Mexican hairless dogs. Sam would love him." "He's probably somebody's pet," Sam's father said. They asked several people if they knew who its owners were, but no one did. They just smiled and shrugged their shoulders. Finally, Sam's mother said, "Maybe he's just a stray. Let's take him home with us. We can give him a good home and Sam will love him." It is against the law to take a pet across the border, but Sam's parents hid the animal in a box, and no one seemed to have seen it. When they got home, they showed it to Sam. "He's a pretty small dog," said Sam. "He's a Mexican dog," his father said. I'm not sure what kind. I think it's called a Mexican hairless. We'll find out, but he's nice, isn't he? They gave the new pet some dog food. Then they washed it, and brushed it, and combed its fur. That night, it slept on Sam's bed. When Sam awakened the next morning, his pet was still there. "Mother," he called. "The dog has a cold." The animal's eyes were running, and there was something white around its mouth. Later that morning, Sam's mother took it to the veterinarian. "Where did you get him?" the vet asked. "In Mexico," she said. "We think he's a Mexican hairless." "I was going to ask you about that." "He's not a hairless," the vet said. "He's not even a dog. He's a sewer rat. And he has rabies." Maybe you will remember. Mrs. Gibbs and her 16-year-old daughter, Rosemary, arrived in Paris on a hot morning in July. They had been on vacation and now were returning home. But Mrs. Gibbs did not feel well, so they decided to rest in Paris for a few days before going on. The city was crowded with tourists. Still, they found a place to stay at a good hotel. They had a lovely room overlooking a park. It had yellow walls, a blue carpet, and white furniture. As soon as they unpacked, Mrs. Gibbs went to bed. She looked so pale that Rosemary asked to have the hotel's doctor examine her. Rosemary did not speak French, but fortunately the doctor spoke English. He took one look at Mrs. Gibbs and said, "Your mother is too sick to travel. Tomorrow, I will move her to the hospital, but she needs a certain medicine. If you go to my home for it, it will save time." The doctor said he did not have a telephone right now. Instead, he would give Rosemary a note for his wife. The hotel manager put Rosemary in a taxi, and in French told the driver how to find the doctor's house. "It will take you only a little while," he told her, "and the taxi will bring you right back." But as the driver slowly drove up one street and down another, it seemed to take forever. At one point, Rosemary was sure they had gone down the same street twice. It took almost as long for the doctor's wife to answer the door, then get the medicine ready. As Rosemary sat on a bench in an empty waiting room, she kept thinking, "Why can't you hurry? Please hurry." Then she heard a telephone ring somewhere in the house. But the doctor had told her he didn't have a telephone right now. What was going on? They drove back as slowly as they had come, crawling up one street and down another. Rosemary sat in the back seat filled with dread, her mother's medicine clutched in her hand. Why was everything taking so long? She was sure the taxi driver was going in the wrong direction. "Are you going to the right hotel?" she asked. He didn't answer, so she asked again, but still got no reply. When he stopped for a traffic light, she threw open the door and ran from the cab. She stopped a woman on the street. The woman did not speak English, but she knew someone who did. Rosemary was right. They had been driving in the wrong direction. When she finally got back to the hotel, it was early evening. She went up to the desk clerk who had given her the room. "I'm Rosemary Gibbs," she said. "My mother and I are in room 505. May I please have the key?" The clerk looked at her closely. "You must be mistaken," he said. "There is another guest in that room. Are you sure you are in the right hotel?" He then turned to help someone else. She waited until he was finished. "You gave us that room yourself when we arrived this morning," she said. "How could you already forget?" He stared at her, as if she had lost her mind. "You must be mistaken," he said. "I have never seen you before. Are you sure you're in the right hotel?" She asked to see the registration card they had filled out when they arrived. "It's June and Rosemary Gibbs," she said. The clerk looked in the file. "We have no card for you," he said. "You must be in the wrong hotel." "The hotel doctor will know me," Rosemary replied. "He examined my mother when we arrived. He sent me for medicine she needs. I want to see him." The doctor came downstairs. "Here's the medicine for my mother," Rosemary said, holding it out to him. Your wife gave it to me. I've never seen you before, he said. You must be in the wrong hotel. She asked for the hotel manager, who had put her in the taxi. Surely he would remember her. You must be in the wrong hotel, he said. Let me give you a room where you can rest. Then maybe you will remember where you and your mother are staying. I want to see our room, Rosemary said, raising her voice. They took her to her room, but it was nothing like the room she remembered. It had a double bed, not twin beds. The furniture was black, not white. The carpet was green, not blue. There was someone else's clothing in the closet. The room she knew had seemingly vanished, and so had her mother. This isn't the room, she said. Where's my mother? What have you done with her? You were in the wrong hotel, the manager said patiently, as if he were speaking to a young child. Rosemary asked to see the police. My mother, our things, the room. They have all disappeared, she told them. Are you sure you are in the right hotel? They asked. She went to her embassy for help. Are you sure it is the right hotel? They asked. Rosemary thought she was losing her mind. Why don't you rest here for a while? They said. Then maybe you'll remember. However, Rosemary's problem was not her memory. It was what she simply did not know. So, what happened to Rosemary's mother? When the hotel doctor saw Mrs. Gibbs, he knew at once that she was about to die. She had a form of the plague, a dread disease that killed quickly and caused frightening epidemics. If the word got out that a woman had died of the plague in the heart of Paris, there would be panic. People in the hotel and elsewhere would rush to escape. The doctor knew what the hotel's owner expected. He was to keep the case a secret. Otherwise, they would lose lots of money. To get Rosemary out of the way, the doctor sent her to the other side of Paris for some worthless medicine. As he expected, Mrs. Gibb died soon after she left. Her body was smuggled out of the hotel to a cemetery, where it was buried. A team of workmen quickly repainted the room and replaced everything inside of it. The desk clerks were ordered to tell Rosemary that she was in the wrong hotel. When she insisted on seeing her room, it had become a different place. And of course, her mother had vanished. All those involved were warned that they would lose their jobs if they gave away the secret. To avoid panic in the city, the police and the newspapers agreed to say nothing of the death. No police reports were filed. No news stories appeared. It was as if Rosemary's mother and her room had never existed. And Rosemary was left alone to believe that she had gone mad.